And that you have it, ladies and gentlemen, was the context, scene setter for the discussion that we'll be having for the next 45 minutes on the green ambitions that I believe are equally shared across the world, but also the concerns and understandings that it's a give and take and that there will be trade-offs involved. Good afternoon to you all. My name is Fifi Peters. I am a journalist at CNBC Africa. We are based in South Africa, Johannesburg. And I must say, I've been coming to the World Economic Forum for about 4 years now, since 2019. And what stood out for me and for most people that I did interact with on the streets and here at the forum is the fact that there was not a lot of snow this time around. Many people weren't even walking around with their spikes in their shoes because there didn't seem to be a need to do so. There was a lot of excitement this morning when it started snowing, and most people taking their videos just to, oh wow. And I never thought, as an African who loves my weather, that I would be so disappointed to not have been so cold while I've been here. But nonetheless, so we do know why, jokes aside, this is the case. We do know that the climate has already changed, and we do know that we're in fact coming from the hottest year on record last year, although I feel as though every year we say that. So the situation is getting worse. Many of you, I know, have been following headlines also from the US. You have to, because it has been impacting your industry directly. You would have followed the pronouncement from US President Donald Trump regarding the Paris Accord, although it might not have come as a surprise, just given the fact that we've been here before. You would have followed his pronouncement on the Inflation Reduction Act over in the US, a policy, from my understanding, that was supposed to encourage further investments into climate, although I know that's also very debatable. You would have also followed his pronouncements on electric vehicles, as well as the headline that most media organizations are going with right now. It is catchy, but it's the headline of "Drill, Baby Drill," and we know what the implications thereof are. So the purpose of this session, I think it would be remiss of us to not reflect on the changes that have transpired for this past week, changes that could materially impact what happens in the global ecosystem for the next 4 years. Already we know that the world was behind its delivery on quite a number of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, climate being one of them, and therefore there is a concern that what is happening right now, the potential shift, risks putting us even further behind the curve. My view, my opinion, but of course I am not ignorant of the fact that I am in a room of experts, stakeholders in the field, and I do look forward to hearing what you have to say regarding the subject of the ambitions that we do share to be greener, but of the acknowledgement that we also know in terms of trade-offs that will have to be made. So leading the conversations, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the panelists, many of whom are no strangers, I know, to you in the room, but for the purpose specifically also of those who are joining us online. Ms. Laurence Tabiana, she's the Chief Executive Officer of the European Climate Foundation. Thanks, ma'am, for being here. Juan Mata, the Chief Executive Officer of Grupo Mariposa Apex. Thank you so much, sir. We do have Mr. Dan Jordanson, the Commissioner for Energy and Housing for the European Commission. Good afternoon and welcome to you, sir. And last but not least, Mr. John Imaz, the Chief Executive Officer of Repsol SA. And to begin the conversation, I struggled because I know that we had all prepared our thoughts on this topic, and I just wonder if we would be giving the conversation real justice if we didn't reflect on the news headlines that have transpired this week. So by opening remarks, can I just get all your reflections on some of those headlines and whether you do think they change anything at all that we are trying to achieve when it does come to the energy transition? Ma'am?
Thank you. I happen to have been the special representative for France to negotiate the Paris Agreement. And this year is the 10th anniversary. Of course, it's not a good news, but as you said, it was expected. That's not the first time. And now, of course, what we'll see if really some countries follows, when in reality the economic situation, the transition, even if it's still too slow compared to the objective we designed in Paris, is just much farther than we were in 2017 when Donald Trump decided to withdraw for the first time. So in a way, it's a shock. There is some brutality on the discourse. That can, of course, influence the public communication. But when talking here, because of course that was my first reaction, talking to many of the CEOs that are there, and of course some leaders, you see that they will not change their plan. And you see, well, now we'll see in the different media the reference that they will not change their plan. That what they are going to do, they are 10 years plan, 15 years plan. So I would say there is a balance in the reality of the threat on the, you know, the decision, but then the world has moved already very much. Second, it's a battle as well, as we know, there is a conflict of power between China and US from now a number of years. On that they were agreeing, well, at least until the end of the year, and including with the Biden administration and the Obama administration. And then China has continued the transition. And now China needs the Paris Agreement to work. Why? Because they have bet all their investment into renewable energy, batteries, electric vehicle, wind turbines, electric artificial intelligence for connection. So I think the economy has moved. It's sad because we will see political gesticulation. Some countries, I know that Argentina was maybe considering, but maybe the Argentinian, now that we have what the Mercosur is arriving, Argentinian business would not agree with that. So this is my nuance, but I think we have to stand up.
Sure.
We have not to be, and my only conclusion is we should not be frightened by Trump menace. We should not. We should stand up and say we will continue whatever you want. And this will happen in US as well. So I'll stop there.
No, fantastic. No, thanks so much for that. And I think I am encouraged by what you had to say. Your interactions with a number of the companies, the CEOs who are here saying that, okay, they are monitoring what's happened, but they're not changing their plans. And that is significant because from my understanding, a lot of the companies that are here are some of the largest entities in the world, essentially. And so it is encouraging. But you're a company owner, sir. And I wonder if you share those sentiments in terms of you're going ahead with your current plans right now.
Well, yes. First, definitely there's a lot of tension. Sure. There's a lot of uncertainty. And in my opinion, it's in these times where you really need to have a right mindset. I think the year started very intense. But it's where we need to have clarity of our purpose as companies and in all the roles and organizations, is where we really need to spend time investing in knowledge in order to have clarity, and we need to have be open to collaborate, to understand, and to listen. I think that these are the times where we need to work hard to gain trust and really focus on driving progress and prosperity. I think that Latin America has had tensions before, challenges before, and if you look back in times of crisis, is where people with the right mindsets, leaders they have the right mindsets, are the ones that really drive change. So this is an important time where we need to be very clear of what is our purpose and how are we contributing to drive progress in our society.
Thanks for that. Mr. Jorgensen, sir, your initial first impressions of a potential change in pathway for the global ecosystem in their greening ambitions?
Well, it's too early to say what the actual consequences will be because we haven't seen that much real policy yet. We've seen some headlines. And yes, of course, the fact that the US has decided to withdraw from the Paris Agreement is not good news. But what really bottom line still stands out also after these couple of days of speaking to business leaders and policymakers from all over the world is that nobody really contests that the green transition is also a transition that makes sense from an economic perspective and from a competitive perspective. So even if you don't, as a policymaker or business leader, believe that climate change is real, or even if you do believe it's real but you don't feel it's your obligation to do something about it, probably, bottom line, you'll still make the same decisions as you would have had you been at the forefront of the climate struggle, because renewables now compete all over the world with fossil energy in price. It outcompetes it in many areas. That's also why last year, globally speaking, every time $1 was invested in fossil energy, $2 was invested in renewables. Sure, some of that is driven by political decisions, idealism if you will, but most of it is driven by good business decisions. So I would argue that even though, yes, there is trade-offs, coming back to the topic of this meeting, but there is also a lot of synergies. So if we want to make a green transition to save the climate, we will at the same time create a lot of new, good, well-paying jobs. We will have healthier economies. We will have energy security, and thereby security for societies as a whole. So that's why, bottom line, I'm still optimistic.
Okay. Last but not least, sir, just final introductory remarks from yourself.
So we are going to go on with our plans.
Going ahead, yeah.
We were the first oil and gas company in the world in 2019 committing with a net zero target by 2050 with a clear roadmap to achieve that figure. We are putting our money where our mouth is. More than 35% of our capex year after year is devoted to low carbon technologies. But when we talk about the just transition, I think that it's important to go to the facts, and mainly in Europe. And the facts are that over the last 20 years, we have lost 4 points in terms of industrial GDP in Europe. The facts are that, as Draghi report states, we have lost over the last 6 years at 12% of the energy consuming industry. We are losing a lot of industrial jobs that are going to Asia and to some other parts of the world. We, after that, import those products that are entering the European market, but those products are emitting a 50% more of CO2 being produced outside Europe. So we are increasing with our policies the CO2 emissions in the world. We are betting as the only solution in favor of the electric vehicle. And today, the facts. I mean, in Germany, a combustion engine hybrid vehicle with renewable diesel over the whole cycle is emitting less CO2 than an electric vehicle. So we are not based on facts. We are based on ideology. And that is not good. We are impacting in a negative way to the European automotive sector because we are taking decisions not supported by technology, and we are more and more importing electric vehicles from China, because probably China bet in favor of that a lot of years ago, and we didn't that in Europe, and we are suffering in the automotive sector. And I mean, and as Draghi said in his report, we need a radical change. Of course, a radical change being and maintaining a clear commitment in terms of reducing CO2 emissions, but at the same time, as Draghi also says in his report, I mean, in our policies in Europe over the last 5-6 years, we have broke the technological neutrality principle. We are taking, bets in favor of technology. Electric vehicle is a good example when we have solutions. Today, 97% of the total energy we use in transport in Europe are liquid fuels. So we are betting, saying that we are going to ban something in 2035, and we have technically solutions that could reduce even the CO2 emissions using this kind of renewable fuels. but we are taking solutions that are not focused and are not based on technology. So, but I want to be optimistic. We have a clear commitment. We have solution. We are investing hard. We have to take and to respect this principle of technological neutrality, but we have to take a holistic view of our policies, because sometimes we are happy saying that we are reducing our emissions in Europe, but that's not true. We are reducing here the emissions, but we don't want to count the emissions of the whole cycle, and we are, in many cases, exporting industries, exporting jobs, and exporting emissions to some other parts of the world. I finish. I'm going to put you an example. Repsol, our company, we have invested in a plant in Spain, in Cartagena, 250 million euros to produce 250,000 tons of HBO and SAF, fully based as feedstock in wastes. I mean, full circular economy. Our money with returns, an industrial bet that is going to increase the industrial jobs in the area, so just transition, and the impact in the Spanish roads in terms of CO2 emissions is going to be 900,000 tons a year. So it's exactly the same impact of the 400,000 electric vehicles we have today in Spain in our roads. Exactly the same impact. What is the difference? The difference is that this feedstock comes from the Spanish farms and from the Spanish rural economy. The difference is that we are going to use all the cars we have, and in social terms, people using these diesel cars are socially from the low income and medium income classes in Spain. The difference is that this electric vehicle bet, we have paid from taxpayers 4 billion euros to support this bet of 400,000 vehicles. And we are going to import mainly these vehicles from China, and we are going to transfer incomes from the low income and the medium income classes of our society to the people that could afford in our society to buy an electric vehicle that are in the first quartile. So my point is, we have to maintain our bet, we have to decarbonize, but we have to decarbonize based in the industrial and the technological capabilities we have in Europe. Otherwise, we are going to have a very unfair transition, losing jobs, losing industries, and contributing to increase the CO2 emissions in the whole cycle in the world.
All right. So thank you so much. Speaking quite passionately about a subject that you're clearly passionate about, laying out the opportunities, but also the complexities thereof. And I want to touch on a point that you did mention specifically regarding policy. And perhaps it's something that we can apply our minds to from a private sector point of view, as obviously it's the policy that as private sector you'll have to follow, but certainly from institutions as well and representations of the public sector. Ma'am, if I come to you regarding policy, what you are seeing right now in the region when it does come to climate action, and perhaps even taking a response from what Mr. Imaz had to say regarding policy, just when you review how the political framework is being structured right now to try and achieve a just energy transition that is a win-win for all, would you say that what you are seeing in the region, ma'am, in the areas that you do look at, is fit for purpose right now?
Well, I would like to take 2 points of view. One, which is more European, and I think, of course, we have to do a lot in Europe just to go there and to include people and create more jobs and more industry, which is the agenda for today, and a global one. Just starting by the global one, we have to remember that when we negotiate Paris Agreement, it was the first time every country finally think they have to produce a climate plan, what is national contribution. So it was very new, it's very new. And really decarbonize an economy is not something simple. So we have a learning process through all this year. And now when I look at what now the national climate plans looks like, it's really a big transformation. Before that was some consultant putting some numbers and the report was on the shelf and stayed there. Now you have a more a whole of government approach, the industrial element, the agriculture and forest element. So again, understanding, and I'm very sorry we had this agreement so late, because it takes a lot of time to switch from a central source of energy we have been living with more than 1 century to others, including that diversity of you. So that's so I am, again, we are running the problem, we are running on its time, but I think this evolution is really, really impressive in many countries. Looking at even Brazilian proposal for their climate plans is really transformational. Look, in Europe, we have very good targets, we should stick to our target. And of course now we have to look at the production part. We locked a lot of targets last time, the way we organize the carbon market, at least ETS. We have a number of tools, and then I understand, well, that's very evident we have to revisit that and now include a growth and industrial development agenda in these targets. And so I think it's a good discussion to have and to compare solutions. Again, vis-à-vis China, I think it's so on one side we need them. We have been living, as just trivial to say that, under the military protection of US, the cheap Russian gas, and the a lot of manufactured products from China. Now we hopefully get rid of the Russian gas for many reasons, for the security issue, but at the same time we see that we have to manage our bilateral relations. And that, I don't have a response. It's a very big, complicated discussion, but what is sure is that the low carbon solution we have in Europe we are able to produce, we should bet on them. Then we can see on what area of technological innovation we could be ahead of the curve compared to where the China is. So we have to have a very strategic approach. So, well, you say on biofuel we can do a lot, could interest farmers. I know the issue in Spain really quite well. Whenever we can produce resources that doesn't impact on the food market, just great, let's do it. Can you use waste? Can we be innovation even in the biofuel? We can do a lot, including for aviation. We'll need that probably for a long time. So I think it's a different perspective we will discuss in Europe now. I see all the companies that have bet on this transformation need support, need investment, cheap capital, because it's still not there. And then the creation of the demand that will ensure that it's a smooth development. And I think we need for that use tools like public procurement, for example, that create that demand. I just take one example and I'll stop. Critical materials, we need to import them. The chemical industry in Europe is able to recycle most of them, even 99% of what. So that would liberate us from some part of the dependence we have vis-à-vis China. But then we have to create the demand. So I think we have to look at our tools. Maybe some are outdated now, too complicated, the simplification discussion. But at the same time, we need to create the demand for the next wave. So I'll stop there, but I think it's a very good discussion.
Mr. Johnson, do you have a view on the current policy on the table right now, particularly in its ability to support a transition that is equitable, sir?
Well, when you phrase the question like that, one would almost think that there was one policy.
Sure.
I'm not sure that would be a fair characteristic. I'm not even sure we have one policy in Europe. But what I will say is that if we look at what has happened in Europe the last 5 years with the European Green Deal, we have put in place a number of policies that will lead us quite far in a green transition that is both just and, if implemented correctly, will make us more competitive. So we'll be reducing our emissions by at least 55% in 2030. We will have more than 42% renewables. Right now we're at 23%, so that's quite a substantial deployment of renewable energy in a few years. Will we do this at the expense of the European citizens and companies? No. On the contrary, if we look at the price level of energy in Europe, it is too high. I very much agree with you on that. That is also the clear conclusion in Professor Draghi's report. But if we look at the role of renewables, the renewables are not to blame for this, for these too high prices. On the contrary, the IEA has estimated that between 2021 and 2023, European consumers actually saved 100 billion euros because of the deployment of renewables. Meaning, had we not have the increase in renewables in that period of time and the years before, we would have paid 100 billion euros more for our energy than we do. So, our job now, from the European Commission side, the European Union side, but certainly also for the member states, is to find ways of making our systems more rational, so that we at the same time bring down the overall costs of energy everywhere in our energy system, manage to innovate better than we do today. So I agree with you, the European car industry is struggling. But I mean, the answer is not to say, well, then let's go back to the internal combustion engine as the technology of the future. The answer is to say, how can we help our industry in Europe to also become more competitive on VEs? And you could, I think, argue similarly for other parts of our industries that are struggling right now.
So coming into this session, we all got a sight of research that had been done by the World Economic Forum, of course, with its partners. And it was talking about the number of companies, top companies in the world, that have embedded climate targets in their corporate strategy. More than half of the around 2,000 companies that were surveyed in the report. But then it was talking about how many of these companies were actually considering the impacts of targets on workers, communities, consumers, and supply chains. That went down to around a fifth. Just speaking to the disconnect there and the difficulty of implementation, as it were. Can you talk to us about your experience, and maybe if you can help us understand why it is that so many companies, while they are saying, they've said to you, and we've heard from yourselves, you are committed to your climate targets and being on this path, but when it comes down to broadening it out to communities, to workers, to supply chains, there becomes some challenges?
Yes. So, in Grupo Mariposa, it's a food and beverage conglomerate. We operate in 20 markets in Latin America. So I would like to bring a perspective of Latin America and less of Europe. And so we visit daily millions of tiendas, small SMEs. And I'm convinced that the only way for the transition to be viable if it's accessible and available. And we need to really think about, as a group, I mean, we also are very committed to becoming net zero. We are in progress and investing on our SBTi objectives. But we always say that sustainability, when we talk about ESG, the S should be first. The social components should be first, and we need to think from the communities, from those owners of the small tiendas, for the agriculture employees and entrepreneurs. How can we build a proposition that it's in line with the transformation that we want to achieve in the communities? We've been working a lot around multidimensional poverty. It's extremely important. When you go to the communities, you see these true entrepreneurs that they really want to create a better future for them and for the families. So whenever we are building, the policies, and when we are building the future, we need to start from there. How can we strengthen the value proposition of those owners of the tiendas so that we do the transition in a way that it brings prosperity for the new generations, in a way that we can communicate it better, measure it better, and that, I think, is going to catalyze a sustainable transition, that's my personal view. I think that there's many things being done, and there's progress, but I think that we need to work together towards being more transparent, more information-driven, showcase what is not working and what is working, and bring into the discussion and into the dialogue not only the public and private sector, but we need to bring into the dialogue those communities, rural community, young generation, and in that dialogue, really create a path where we use the information, what we have available, and the commitments to study the policies.
We were talking before the session began, and we were just talking about the similarities of Latin America and Africa, where I have already mentioned that I come from, and where the business landscape is very similar in terms of small businesses being the main actors, as it were. I heard a statistic around 80% of GDP in terms of SMEs, but then in terms of access to finance, the difficulties that small businesses do have in terms of accessing finance, let alone green finance. And maybe one has to wonder to what degree the difficulty of accessing capital that is affordable is playing into the difficulty of companies being able to implement some of their green and climate strategies further across the value chain. So I'll come to you, just Mr. Imaz, if you can just add there.
Yeah, I mean, I share Madame Tubiana's point about the complexity of the debate we have. And I take also the point of Mr. Commissioner about the importance of renewable power. I mean, my own company last year put in operation 1.5 gigawatts of renewable power because we believe on that. And we believe that that is an important part of the solution. And I mean, same about the electric vehicle. I was, let me say, and let me personalize, 15 years ago, the person that promoted the first electric vehicle recharging business in Spain. So my point is that that is a part of the solution. It's not the whole solution. And I want to underline and to stress what Draghi says in his report. We need to respect the principle of technological neutrality. So, I mean, the dimension, the ambition of reducing CO2 emissions is too large, is huge. And having technologies to do that, we can't discard technologies. We have to use everything. And we have to do that, let me say, in a sustainable way, also in social terms. And I'm going to put, and I finish with that, an example. We own 5 refineries in Spain. Probably, let me say, the most competitive refining system in Europe. I mean, we have to produce products, I mean, to allow you to come here using our products to Davos, for instance, or to use the carpet we are now on that is produced with oil or products, or this micro I have here, or the blades of a wind farm, or the panels of a solar photovoltaic plant, or the pieces of an electric car. That is part of our responsibility. Our moral responsibility is to go on producing this oil and these products. But because you need it. I mean, you are the consumers of these products. But at the same time, our moral responsibility is to reduce in a dramatic way the carbon footprint of these products. For that reason, we are transforming our refineries. And we are investing hard to build what we call multi-energy hubs. We are changing the feedstock. Oil is there, but more and more we have vegetal oils, recycled oils, pyrolyzed plastics, animal fats, hydrogen. This hydrogen is going to be part, and is part of the molecule of the hydrocarbon we produce. And more we are producing liquids that are going to be decarbonized. We have the industrial capacity to produce that. What is the alternative? To shut down, to close these refineries, to lose these thousands and thousands and thousands of industrial jobs, or to produce these products, decarbonizing our economy with the industrial capacities we have. We want an open regulation. We want a regulation that is able to count the whole CO2 emissions of the cycle. If we ban the combustion engine, I mean, we are closing the door to this kind of technologies. There is no option for this transformation. And we are not going to solve the CO2 problem, because what is happening is that we are increasing the lack of certitude in the market. The car fleet is getting all in our countries. We are not reducing the CO2 emissions at the speed we could do that now with new cars. and at the same time, we are not using all the technological solutions we have. So, openness, ambition to reduce CO2 emissions, and using all the technological and industrial capabilities we have in Europe.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to open up for questions in just a short while, but sir, I know you had a comment you wanted to make.
I need to, I think, make one point that's not necessarily directed specifically to you, sir, but maybe it is you. You be a judge yourself. Very often, when people who are against the subsidies that favor renewables or regulation that favor renewables, they forget to say that the fossil sector is not technological neutral. The fossil sector has been subsidized and has been regulated in a way that was beneficial to it for decades, and to some extent still is. So, in a perfect world where we did not need any subsidies, where the market did not have any failures, the market was a sentient entity that also would help us solve climate change. Even in that theoretical world, we would then need to start by acknowledging that the whole fossil energy sector as we know it is built on subsidies, and that it has been favored by politicians making decisions. That has been necessary for our industrial revolution. We wouldn't have been there today had it not been for that. But now, the threat to our civilization and our societies is climate change. So, yes, we will make decisions that favor the technologies that will fight climate change.
I mean, tell me only say that, excuse me.
Well, you keep.
No, I agree
you
with your
also
point.
believe in this, and you have an electric car, but you then also say things that goes in the completely opposite direction.
No, but I mean, I'm not against support and subsidies to promote and to boost the energy transition and climate change. I agree with your point, Mr. Commissioner, fully agree. My only point is that we have to open and we have to count exactly the reduction over the full cycle of any technology we use, not more, but I take your point.
All right.
Yeah, well, sometimes a technology also needs support in the development phase. Actually, that's where it needed the most. Mm-hmm. So you will not support a technology that from day one will have solved our problem. That's the whole reason why they needed the subsidies.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Mr. Chibena?
I think again, we have to look at the number. And when I look at what happened since 2022, I don't know the numbers done, but you may know them better. The subsidies that EU has allocated to the consumption of gas and oil are really an enormous amount of money.
Not the EU as such, but EU countries, yes.
Yeah, not EU, yeah. Of course, not as your job, but EU. I think we are above 800 million.
It's a huge number.
It's a huge number. So I think this is not healthy, given the fact that this is taxpayers' money. It's not comes from miracle. And of course there is, a very big element on the transition, the justice element, that we should really combat energy poverty, so really people are struggling to pay their bills. But these subsidies doesn't make it all. They don't really are targeted today. In any country I know, I more or less know well, was the 10 economy where we are offices of the European Climate Foundation. And then, of course, this is like a broad type of subsidies. So on one side, we need to protect people because they have to be able to heat or their homes. But that's not the total amount of money that goes there. So I think there is a mismatch. At the same time, we know that the sector, the fossil fuel sector, doesn't pay really well. For electricity prices in Europe, yes, because we have the ETS, so there is a price there. Not for all. The system of tax on the other consumption are very different from one country to another one. But I think there is climate change is a market failure, basically because this externality, which are really high, are costing now a lot of money. So it's no more long time, the problem of short-term benefits to long-term cost. now we have seeing, I just find a very interesting number last week. The insurance companies, was a private insurance company, not the reinsurers, but the insurance company, have had as much benefit from their, they are of course investors, so they invest as well in fossil fuels, so they get a certain number, 12 billion of benefits, but their cost on the climate extreme event were exactly the same. So on one side, we have now to come in that the cost of climate change, the human cost, of course, thinking of you, of Spain, has been terrible. They have been terrible 2 years ago in Germany.
Sure.
They are terrible everywhere. In Chad.
Africa.
Africa, in Chad, I think last month or 2 months ago, it was not hundreds of people that died, much more than that. And of course, all the economies, the farmers. So we should now say, look, this is an enormous collective cost and cost for the companies themselves. Just stop there. France is a very big nuclear producer of electricity. Nuclear sector is at risk, not because it's not safe, there is a lot of things that are being well done, but because of extreme weather events. When you cannot have water enough, or you have we have been through one of the crises in France when I was in the Prime Minister's office. So even these very big industry successes can be at risk because of the climate, the extreme events. And we see that, of course, in California as well. So I think we have to change the mindset of the time, and that we have now facing the cost now and not tomorrow only.
I think maybe it was a bit of ignorance to think that the conversation wouldn't have been as robust as it is right now. I think it also speaks to the complexity in trying to achieve a common goal, a lot of views, a lot of opinions about which direction and how we get there. And it's a good thing as well, because it does speak to the fact that we're not standing in one place. We are out of time, essentially, but I do want to know if there's anyone from the room who wants to make a contribution before we wrap things up. I'm so sorry to only give you 30 seconds.
No, 30 seconds are perfect, actually. My name is Roxana. My generation, Gen Z, is perhaps the one that's most concerned about climate change because it's going to be the one that's most affected by it. So, Mrs. Tubian, a question for you. I know that the ECF has done some amazing things on raising the new generation of climate leaders and really investing in this area. So could you maybe give us an example so that we end on a positive note?
And I'm so sorry to you, ma'am. 30 seconds as well. And we are even over.
With big pleasure. One of my proud is young leaders in Poland, coming from Friday for Future, going to talk to the electricity company in Poland that was based only on coal. And the discussion with the trade unions, the CEO of the biggest electricity company in Poland, and these young women, which are very young ones, result into a process where now they will decarbonize an entire electricity production by 2035. We have hundreds of stories like that, and because of you.
So there you go. Mr. Matza, final last words? Yeah, the conversation continues and it will go on.
Yeah.
But thanks so much to the speakers. Thank you so much to yourselves as well. Have a great afternoon further.